It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. It's time for our Friday Agile Not So Agile episode of the Daily Stand Up Podcast, and I'm so happy that you could be here with me. This is my favorite day of the week because I get to talk about things that aren't necessarily directly related to Agile, but are Agile in nature. So here goes. So, in a recent class that I was teaching, I had an opportunity to interact with some folks who, let's just say, had differing perspectives from me when it comes to politics or when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to lots of different things. And I almost felt like at certain points during one of the classes that there was a specific individual who was trying to push an agenda. Now, for those of you who know me, you know I'm not a big fan of anyone pushing any agenda, whether it's right wing, left wing. I'm pretty centrist, and I believe that finding the best person to do the job, regardless of who it is, regardless of what party they're from, is often or always the right answer. So now that I got that out of my system, I just felt very emotionally disappointed and drained by the end of this workshop because I felt like I could have done more. I should have said something, or there was just, I felt distanced and I couldn't figure out why I kept blaming myself. But I'll tell you, I beat myself up pretty good over this. And what it all came down to, the conclusion was that I needed to decide where I was going to stand or where I was going to sit and what I was going to say and what was appropriate and how I could balance my own personal thoughts with the professional atmosphere that I have to give when I'm teaching a course. And it's difficult because a lot of times you just want to say something and stand up, but at the same time, you certainly don't want to upset someone who could be a potential future student or a client, but you also don't want to allow bullying. So, one of the tips or one of the things that crossed my mind was, what tips would I give to someone if they came to me with this very same issue? If someone came to me and said, hey, I really want to say something or I should say something, but I don't know if I can, what should I do? If someone came in and spelled it all out to me that way, I think that, I would have a hard time giving them advice right up front. So I sat down and I wrote down some thoughts on a piece of paper and just kind of got everything that was going on inside of my head out of my head. And I came up with some pretty good ideas. And the first thing I came up with is take a step back. Now, a lot of people say take a breath, take a step back, count to 10, whatever you need to do, but step outside of your normal position and try to eliminate and make sure that there's no bias that you're feeling so that you can give their opinion equal credit so that you can, because a lot of times I'll tell you what, I've had times where people have explained something to me and I've walked away saying, wow, I never thought of it that way. Right. So there are times where, I think that we can all benefit from toning down our own personal thoughts and leaning into just hearing what the other party has to say. And I can tell you, I've been educated, but I won't go as far as to say I've been woke, right? But I have definitely been educated, and I've learned a lot of things. And there's some times where I say, "Wow, that's a good point," and I never thought of it that way. There are other times where I say, "Wow, I don't feel any more educated than I was when this conversation started." But the good news is, at least I was open-minded and I came in without bias. The second thing, or that I wrote down, or the second piece of this position, is that we need to stand up for what we believe in. Now, this is the tricky one. This is the tough one because there are times where we want to say more or do more, but it's important for us to have balance. So there's a way to still say, hey, I have a line and this line shouldn't be crossed. So we need to make sure that we do a good job of establishing boundaries of where we're not going to cross, what we're not going to say, and what we're not going to accept other people saying. Because I think that if we don't do that, we're positioning ourselves as weak and we're not taking control of situations. So we definitely need to stand up for what we believe. And the third thing that I came up with is approach everything with an attitude of compassion and love. If we come in and have empathy for others, it's going to help us to better position ourselves in their shoes, even if it's just for a moment, so that we can understand where they're coming from and we can approach life and making critical decisions with a heart that's full of joy instead of a heart that's full of anger or fear. And I think that sometimes we're just too fearful of what other people do or what they say or what they believe, and we don't allow ourselves to be filled with joy. So if you follow those three tips, what I can assure you is that over time you'll find yourself being more grateful and having gratitude for the positive things that are happening in your life. You'll find yourself having empathy for those who think differently than you do, and you'll find yourself just having joy, and I think that's so important. So as we celebrate Easter and as we're coming around to that season, for those of you who celebrate Christianity, I think I'd like to take an opportunity just to wish you all a happy Easter. And regardless of whether you practice this faith or not, I want you to think about the sacrifices that others have made for you. And I want you to really hone in and focus on what you can do to uplift others. Because there's several times in our personal lives and our spiritual lives where we don't take time to recognize all of the things that others do for us. And I think that if we just take a moment to do that and set that time aside, that it'll help prepare us to do those three things so that we can approach life decisions better. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, keeping it short and sweet. Hope you have an amazing holiday weekend. And as always, I encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until Monday, do take care.